Hello everyone, wishing you all good health, peace, and the strength to embrace the truth, no matter how it changes your life. Sometimes the answers we've been searching for arrive in the smallest of envelopes. For Eo Hung and Lai Tieu caught, it was DNA report. Cold paper carrying truth that warmed their hearts. The boy was theirs, their flesh, their blood, their son. For a moment joy overflowed, washing away years of doubt and unanswered questions. Yet even they held this truth in their hands. Shadows lingered on the horizon. Would love and family be enough to face the obstacles still waiting for them? Or would the world find new ways to test what fate had finally brought together? The envelope lay on the kitchen table, untouched, as if the mere act of opening it would change everything. Lai Tieu stood by the window, her fingers curled tightly around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Outside, rain streaked down the glass, blurring the world into a watercolor of gray. Across from her, Hung sat with his elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on the small white rectangle between them. For weeks they had waited for this moment. The DNA results that would confirm what their hearts had been whispering since the day Min was born. And yet, now that the truth was within reach, fear sat heavy in the air. Hung reached out, his hand steady despite the storm in hhis chest. He broke the seal, unfolded the paper, and read the words that would bind or break them. Probability of paternity: 99.99%. Their eyes met. No words, just rush of emotions. Relief, disbelief, joy, something deeper, almost sacred. Min wasn't just child, they both loved he was their child. But reality doesn't dissolve with one piece of paper. The truth was out, yes, but so were the whispers in town, the judgmental glances, the relatives who would not easily forgive past mistakes. There were questions about the future, about custody, about family names, about whether the life they had started to build could survive the weight of old wounds. That night, after putting the children to bed, they sat together in the quiet. Tieu Ka, Hung said softly, "This doesn't change how I feel, but it does mean people will talk. They'll try to pull us apart." As she looked at him, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "Then let them talk. I've already lived through worse than words." Outside, the rain eased and the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light across the room. It wasn't promise of easy days ahead, but it was enough reminder that even after the heaviest storm, there is still way forward, and together they would walk it. The following morning, the air in the small town felt different. Lighter for them, heavier for everyone else. News travels faster than the river's current, and by midday, almost everyone had heard. Min was Hung and Lai Tieu Ka's son. Some faces in the market softened with quiet smiles, as if the truth had finally set something right. Others, however, turned away, whispering behind hands, their eyes sharp with judgment. Tieu kept her chin high. She bought vegetables, hand clutching her hand, and skipping beside her. At home, Hum was fixing the latch on the front gate. When he saw her returning, he noticed the faint stiffness in her shoulders. "They said something, didn't they?" he asked, wiping his hands on cloth. She hesitated. "Not worth repeating." Hung set down his tools and took the basket from her. "Then we won't. We have nothing to explain to anyone." But as evening fell, the unspoken worry surfaced. Over dinner, Han asked innocently to Mama, "Why are people saying Min and his papa's son like it's something new? He's always been a." Tieu smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Because sometimes, Han, people need proof for what love already knows." Later that night, while the children slept, they sat by the open window. The cool night breeze carried the scent of wet earth. Hung, as she began, her voice quiet but firm, "I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. But I am afraid of how it might hurt the kids, the way it might make them feel different." He reached for her hand, his grip warm and certain. "Then we make sure they never doubt where they belong, not for a single day." And in that moment she knew the obstacles ahead were real, but so was the love that had carried them this far. The DNA had given them proof, but their bond didn't need it. What they needed now was courage, the kind of courage to keep living loudly, even when the world whispered. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. Not quieter, but steadier. Lai Tieu noticed that the sideways glances in town grew less frequent, though few stubborn voices still clung to old gossip like it was the only thing keeping them warm. Hung had thrown himself into his work, expanding the small shop into a place where neighbors gathered not only to buy goods but to exchange news, share tea, and slowly soften toward the family they once judged. Min, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling around the adults, was growing fast. His laughter filled the house, sound so pure it seemed to chase away away shadows. One Sunday afternoon, the four of them walked by the river. Han held her little brother's hand, pointing out fish darting between the reeds, her voice bubbling with excitement. Tieu trailed behind them with Hung, the sunlight dancing across the water. This, Hung said quietly, watching the children. All I ever wanted. No papers, no approvals from anyone else, just this. Tieu smiled, her fingers brushing his. We fought so hard to get here, and I think we'll keep fighting. But maybe that's what makes it worth it. Hung looked at her, his eyes reflecting both pride and fierce protectiveness. Then we fight together. That night after the children were asleep, Tieu stood by Manon's crib. She thought about how one sheet of paper had confirmed what her heart known from the first time she held him. But more than that, she thought about how love, real love, wasn't something proven in lab or courtroom. It was in the way Hung woke early to make breakfast. It was in Han's gentle patience with her brother. It was in the quiet moments, the shared burdens, the unshakable decision to stay. There would be more obstacles ahead, as she didn't doubt it, but for the first time in years she felt certain that no matter what came, they would face it as family, unshaken, unbroken, and undeniably theirs. Spring arrived with soft breezes and the scent of new blossoms drifting through the open windows of their home. Tieu found herself waking each morning with a quiet gratitude, not because life had suddenly become easy, but because the weight she once carried alone was now shared. One afternoon, Hung came home earlier than usual, his shirt sleeves rolled up, mischievous glint in his eyes. "Come with me," he said. He led her to the edge of the town where an abandoned shop stood. The faded sign creaked in the wind, and the windows were clouded with dust. But when Hung unlocked the door, sunlight poured in to reveal wide wooden floors and shelves waiting to be filled. "I bought it," he said simply. "For us, for you. We can turn it into something of our own. Bookstore, cafe, maybe both. Place the kids can grow up in." Tieu stood in the doorway, her throat tightening. She had imagined future many times, but it had always felt far away, like something reserved for other people. Now it was here, tangible, warm, and full of possibility. They spent the next weeks cleaning, painting, and laughing over small mistakes, insisted on choosing corner for reading nook while Manon learned to crawl across the polished floorboards, giggling at every cheer from his parents. Yet, even as joy filled their days, Tieu could sense the eyes of those still waiting for them to fail. One evening, while locking up the new shop, Hum noticed her gaze lingering on the street. "Still thinking about them?" he asked. She nodded. "Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever stop doubting us." Hung slipped his arm around her shoulders. "Maybe they won't. But their doubts don't feed our children, don't build our dreams. Let them keep their words. We'll keep our life." And in that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. Obstacles don't always disappear. Sometimes you simply outgrow them. As the street lamps flickered on and the town settled into the quiet of night, Tieu looked at the shop they had built together and realized this was more than a fresh start. It was proof that love, when guarded fiercely, could turn even the sharpest judgment into nothing more than distant noise. Some truths in life are not meant to change the world, but to change the way we see our own. Tieu's journey reminds us that proof, like the DNA test, can silence doubt, but it cannot build happiness. Happiness is built in the daily acts of love, trust, and shared effort. Her story teaches that obstacles will always exist. Some people will never approve, no matter how much evidence you show or how hard you work, but their judgment does define you. Your choices do. When you choose to keep building, to keep loving, and to keep walking forward despite whispers, you reclaim the power over your own life. It is also a lesson in courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to protect what matters even when fear is present. Tieu and Hung faced doubt, gossip, and the weight of their past, yet they held on to their family like lifeline, and in doing so they proved that the strength of home is measured by outside approval, but by the loyalty of the hearts inside it. Perhaps the greatest truth of all is this: you do not have to erase your struggles to build your future. You simply have to decide that the people you love and the life you're creating are worth more than the voices trying to pull you back. And so Tieu's story becomes more than just tale about family finding the truth. It becomes mirror for anyone standing at the edge of doubt. It tells that the path forward is rarely free of stones, but every step we take with purpose smooths the way for those who will follow. Her journey also shows that love is not fragile. It does not shatter under the weight of gossip or bend to the will of those who wish us to fail. Real love, the kind she and Hung fought for, is a quiet strength, the steady hand at your back, the voice that says, we'll get through this together. Another lesson lies in the way they transformed their challenges into opportunities. Instead of letting the truth divide them, they used it as foundation to build something greater. Home, shared dream. In doing so, they proved that life's trials can be the very soil where new beginnings grow. Finally, her story is a reminder that the measure of life is not found in the perfection of its chapters, but in the courage to keep turning the page. No matter how heavy the past, no matter how loud the voices of doubt, you can choose to step forward, not in search of perfect ending, but in the creation of life that feels true to you. Because in the end, the world question, but your heart will always know where you belong. And perhaps the most powerful part of Tieu's lesson is this: belonging is not something granted by others. It is something you claim for yourself. She did not wait for the town to welcome her. She built her own welcome in the walls of her home, in the laughter of her children, and in the unwavering presence of Hung. Her life whispers truth many of us forget. You do not need universal approval to live a meaningful, joyful life. What you need is a circle, even if it is small, that believes in you, supports you, and walks with you through every storm. Through her resilience, we see that obstacles are not signs to stop, but tests to see how deeply we want what we dream of. Some people might turn back, but Tieu pressed forward, not because the path was easy, but because what waited at the end was worth every struggle. And so her story leaves us with challenge. When the world doubts you, will you shrink to fit expectations, or will you stand tall and build something they cannot ignore? For Tieu, the answer was clear, and because she chose love, courage, and her own truth, her life became living proof that even in the face of doubt, happiness is not only possible, it is unstoppable.